Chapter 11. The supplies were stowed, safe against mist, mice, and anything else the changeable climate of Oran Ridge might drop onto the cottage. Zancha had checked them twice during the interminable night. She'd made herself a pot of tea and drunk it all. The herbs should have helped her relax, but they hadn't. Dawn's golden light fell sideways on the bed where she hadn't slept. Her door was wide open, inviting shadows. Urza's wasn't. It wasn't warded with layers of leave-me-alone sorcery, but it wasn't leaking sound. The sounds had stopped coming through the wall in the unmeasured hours after midnight. Ratapi, Zancha had told herself, had probably fallen asleep, and Urza rarely made noise when he was alone. Nothing unusual, nothing to worry about. So why had she opened her door? Why had she spent the last of the night damp and shivering? Hadn't Ratapi demonstrated, if not an ability to take care of himself, then an inclination to ignore her advice? And hadn't Urza welcomed Rat more enthusiastically than she'd dare hope? Whatever had brought silence to the far side of the wall, it wouldn't have been murder. No matter how annoying Ratapi got, he'd survive. Zancha unwound her blankets. Her joints creaked. Phyrexia was easier on the flesh and bone than the Oran Ridge. She broke the ice in her washstand, cleared her head with a few breathtaking splashes, then went outside and listened at the door. She'd give them until midday. If Ratapi hadn't reappeared by then, Zancha planned to take a chisel to the cottage's common wall. Before that, she had one more gambit to try and put her chisel to work on the hardened ashes underneath her outdoor hearth. When the fire was just right, Zancha covered it with an iron gate and covered the grate with a rasher of bacon. A friendly breeze carried the aromas into the cottage. She never knew when or if Urza would be in the mood to eat, but if Ratapi was alive, he'd be out the door before the bacon burnt. Right on schedule, Rat appeared in the doorway. "By the book, that smells good!" He didn't have the cross-grained look of a man who had just awakened, and he said something, Zancha couldn't hear what, over his shoulder before closing the door behind him. "I'm starving." "I see you survived." Zancha hadn't realized how angry she was until she heard her own voice. "Here, eat. Starting tomorrow, you can cook your own." On his own hearth, too. Zancha wasn't sharing, at least not until she calmed down. Ratapi had the sense to approach her cautiously. "You're angry about last night?" Zancha slammed hot, crisp bacon on a wooden platter and thrust it at him. She didn't know why she was so upset and didn't want to discuss the matter. "I guess it got out of hand. When I saw him, Urza, he's Urza the Artificer. You were right, back in Effin Pincher. I didn't believe you. I thought maybe you thought he was Urza, but I didn't think he could be the Urza, the by the holy book Artificer." Ratapi paused long enough to inhale a piece of bacon. "I thought I'd been as scared as I could before I met you, but that was before he touched me. Avo here, I swear I'll never be afraid again." "Don't make promises you can't keep." "There can't be anything scarier." Ratapi shook his head and shoved another piece into his mouth. This time he chewed before he swallowed. She was about to criticize his manners, but he was too fast for her. "He's Urza. Urza is the real Urza, and I'm Mishra. I'm talking to a legend, watching things, hearing things I can't imagine, because Urza the Artificer, straight out of the Antiquity Wars, thinks I'm his brother, Mishra the Mighty, Mishra the Destroyer, and we're going to put what's wrong back to rights again." Another pause, more bacon, more bad manners. But then he hadn't had manners before. His face was flushed and his eyes never stopped moving. "I'm Mishra. Ava here. I'm Mishra. He tries to trick me sometimes. Says things he doesn't believe. Things I shouldn't believe. I have to watch him close. Watch him close. Did you see his eyes, Zancha? Avo here. I think he's a little touched. But I stay ahead of him. Nearly. I have to. I'm almighty Mishra." Zancha had had enough of Ratapi's babbling. She wasn't as fast as Urza, but she was fast enough to seize a would-be Mishra by the neck of his tunic and whirl him against the nearest post. Damp debris from the thatching rained down on them both. "You're not Mishra. You merely pretend to be Mishra. You are Ratapi, son of Medea, and the day you forget that will be the day you die, because he is Urza, and you cannot hope to stay ahead of him. Do you understand?" When a wide-eyed Ratapi didn't immediately say yes, Zancha rattled his spine against the post. His chin bobbed vigorously. She released his tunic and stepped back. The greater part of her anger was gone. "I know who I am, Zancha," Ratapi insisted, sounding more like himself, more like the youth Zancha thought she knew. "I'm Rat, just Rat, but if I don't forget just a little when he looks at me, Zancha, when Urza the Artificer looks at me, if I don't let myself believe I am who he thinks I am, who you told me to be, that..." He stared at the closed door. "When I saw his eyes, I never believed that part, Zancha. It's not in the Antiquity Wars. Kayla wrote about Tawnos coming to tell her about how he'd seen Urza with the Weak Stone and the Might Stone embedded in his skull. She thought it was all lies, nice lies, because Tawnos didn't want to know the truth. The idea that the Weak Stone or the Might Stone kept Urza alive, that's not even in Jarsal. There's only one source for the stuff about Urza's eyes glowing with all the power of the Silex. 4 scraps of parchment bound by mistake at the back of the T-Mill Codex. They're supposed to be Tawnos' deathbed confession. My father said it was pure apocrypha, but it wasn't. Urza's eyes, they're the Weak Stone and the Might Stone, aren't they? They're what kept him alive. If Urza really is alive, if he's not just something the stones have created. Waste not, want not. Xantcha hadn't found Mishra the Destroyer. She found Mishra the Skeptic and Mishra the babbling pedant. She shot him a disbelieving look. Don't ask me. Last night you were the one that said the Weak Stone was singing to you. Radapi winced and walked past the bacon without taking a slice. 2 eyes, 2 stones, Xantcha continued. I thought you'd gotten lucky. I heard something, not with my ears, but inside my head. He stopped and faced her, confusion painfully evident on his face. I called it singing because that's the best word I had for it, and it came from his left eye. He sat down on the ash bucket, staring at his feet. You don't want to know how I knew which eye was which? Measured by his expression, she wouldn't like the answer, but... Go ahead, enlighten me. It told me. It told me what it was, and that it had been waiting for someone who could hear it. When Urza said Harbin wasn't his son, it was... Radapi made a helpless gesture that ended with his fingertips pressed against his temples. Not pain, but like the feeling that comes after pain. He stopped again and closed his eyes before continuing. Xantcha, I heard Mishra. Well, not quite heard him. It was just there in my mind from the stone. I knew what Mishra thought, what he would have said. Not his words exactly, my words. His eyes opened. He stared at Xantcha with only a shadow of his usual cockiness. I know who I am, Xantcha. I'm Radapi, son of Medea, or just Rat now, because I lost everything when I became a slave. I was born almost 18 years ago in the city of Pincher on the 6th day after the Festival of Fruits in the 6th year of Tabarna's reign. I'm me. But, Xantcha, pretending to be Mishra the way you asked me to, he broke the stare. It's not pretend. I could get lost. I could wind up thinking I am Mishra before this is over. Xantcha bit her lip and sighed. Radapi wasn't looking, didn't seem to have heard. Right now, while you're sitting there, can you hear the Weak Stone singing Mishra's thoughts in your mind? He shook his head. Only when I'm looking at Urza's eyes, or when he's looking at me. She began another sigh, of relief this time, but she began too soon. I'm worried, Xantcha. It's so real, so easy to imagine him, and that's after just one night. By next year, when I'm supposed to go back to Effin Pincher, you should have warned me. Trust Rat, or Radapi, or Mishra, or whatever he wanted to call himself to go for the guild. I didn't know about the singing. I knew about Urza's eyes, where they came from anyway, and I did warn you about that. But singing and Mishra, beyond the Antiquity Wars, I don't know anything but what Urza's told me, and I guess there's a lot he didn't. The rest of Xantcha's anger went with that admission. She leaned against a porch post, grateful that no one was looking at her. All those times Urza had glowered at her, eyes ablaze, had the voice of Mishra's Weak Stone tried to make itself heard in her mind? Why, really, had she gone in search of a false Mishra? What had drawn her to Radapi? She'd known he was one to fulfill her plans before she'd gotten a good look at him. Can I trust myself? Xantcha had no assurances, not for herself or for him. I don't know. Radapi folded his arms tightly across his ribs and shrank within himself. Xantcha had spent all her life with Phyrexians, or Urza. She wasn't accustomed to expressive faces and wasn't prepared for the gust of empathy that blew from Radapi to her. She tried to shake it off with a change of subject and a touch of humor. What were the 3 of you talking about all night? Radapi wasn't interested. A year from now, will there be anything left of me? Will I be myself? I'm still me, Xantcha answered. Right. We talked some about you. She should have expected that, but hadn't. I haven't lied to you, Radapi, not about the important things. The Phyrexians are real, and Urza's the only one with the power to defeat them. But Urza's wits are addled, aren't they? And you thought you'd cure him if you'd scrounge up someone who would remind him of his brother. You thought you could make him stop living in the past. I told you that before we left Medrin. Are you as old as he is? Xantcha found the question surprisingly difficult to answer. Younger? A bit, I think. You're not the only one who doesn't know who or what to trust inside. He told you I was Phyrexian? Repeatedly, but since he thinks I'm Mishra, he's not infallible. The bacon was burning. Zancha scraped the charred rashers onto the platter and made a show of eating one, swallowing time while she decided how to answer. You can believe him. She took a deep breath and recited in Phyrexian squeals, squeaks, and chattering as best as she could remember them the first lesson she learned from the Vat priests. Newts you are, and newts you shall remain. Obey and learn, pay attention, make no mistakes. Radipir gaped. That day in the sphere when you cut yourself. If I'd taken the knife from you, I'd bleed no matter where you cut me. It would have hurt. You could have killed me. You were inside the sphere. I'm not Urza. I don't think Urza can be killed. I don't think he's alive, not the way you and I are. You and I, Zancha, no one I know lives for 3,000 years. Closer to 3,400, I think. Urza believes I was born on another plane and that the Phyrexians stole me while I was still a child, then completed me the way they completed Mishra. But that can't be true. I don't know what happened to Mishra. But the newts, we've got to be completed while we're still new. Urza's never accepted that I was dragged out of a vat in the faint of flesh. So, in addition to everything else, Phyrexians are immortal? To survive completion, newts have to be very resilient, immortally resilient. But Phyrexians can die, especially newts, just not of age or anything else that born folk might call natural. And after 3,400 years, Urza still doesn't believe you? Urza's mad, Radipi. What he knows and what he believes aren't always the same. Most of the time, it doesn't make any difference, as long as he acts to defeat Phyrexia and stops trying to recreate the past on a tabletop. Radipi nodded. He showed me what he was working on. Again. Sancha couldn't muster surprise or indignation, only weariness. I guess, if you say so. Funny thing, with the Weakstone, I get a sense of everything that happened to Mishra. He fell silent until Zancha looked at him. You're half right about what happened. Urza's half right, too. Phyrexians wanted the Weakstone. When Mishra wouldn't surrender it, one of them tried to kill him. The Weakstone kept him alive then, and even when they took him apart later, but it couldn't keep him sane. Radipi strangled a laugh. Maybe burning his own mind was the last sane thing Mishra did. After that, there's only images like paintings on a wall and waiting. Endless waiting for Urza to listen. And now Mishra and the Weakstone, or both of them together, have you to speak for them. So far, I listen, but I speak for myself. What does that mean? Radipi began to pace. He made a fist with his right hand and pounded it against his left palm. It means I'd do anything to have my life back. I wish I'd never seen you. I wish I was still a slave in Medrin. Tukta and Garv only had my body. My thoughts were safe. I didn't know the meaning of powerless until I looked into Urza's eyes. I'm as dead as he is, as Mishra, as you. The self-proclaimed dead man stopped beside the bacon platter and ate a rasher. I'm not dead. No, you're Phyrexian, Radipi retorted between swallows. You weren't born. You were immortal when you were decanted. How could you ever be dead? Zancha ignored the question. A year, Radipi, or less. As soon as Urza turns away from the past, I'll take you back to Effin Pincher. You have my word for that. Silence, then. Urza doesn't trust you. That stung, even if Radipi was only repeating something that Zancha had heard countless times before. I would never betray him. Or you. But you're Phyrexian. If I believe you, you've never been anything but Phyrexian. They're your kin. My father once told me not to trust a man who led a fight against his kin. Betrayal is a nasty habit that once acquired is never cast aside. Your father is dead. When it came to cruelty, Zancha had been taught by masters. Radipi stiffened, leaving the last rashers of bacon on the platter. He walked a straight path away from the cottage. Zancha let him go. She banked the fire, ate the last of the soggy bacon, and retreated into her room. Her treasured copies of the Antiquity Wars offered no solace, not against the turmoil she'd invited into her life when she'd bought herself a slave. And though there was no chance that she'd fall asleep, Zancha threw herself down on her mattress and pillows. She was still there, weary, lost in time, and wallowing in an endless array of painful memories, when she sensed a darkening and heard a gentle tapping on her open door. Are you awake? If Zancha hadn't been awake, she wouldn't have heard Ratipi's question. If she had her wits, she could have answered him with unmoving silence, and he might have gone away. But Zancha couldn't remember the last time anyone had knocked on her door. Sheer surprise lifted her onto her elbows, revealing her secret before she had a chance to keep it. Ratapi crossed her threshold and settled himself at the table on her stool. There was only one in the room. Zancha sat up on the mattress, not entirely pleased with the situation. Ratapi stiffened. He seemed to reconsider his visit, but spoke softly instead. I'm sorry. I'm angry, and I'm scared and just plain stupid. You're the closest I've got to a friend right now. I shouldn't have said what I said. I'm sorry. He held out his hand. Zancha knew the signal. It was oddly consistent across the plains where men and women abound. Smile if you're happy, frown when you're not, make a fist when you're angry, but offer your open hand for trust. It was as if men and women were born knowing the same gestures. She kept her hands wrapped around her pillow. Betrayed by the truth? He winced and lowered his hand. Not the truth, just words I knew would hurt. You did it, too. Call it square? Why not? Zancha offered her hand, which Ratapi seized and shook vigorously, then released as if he was glad to have the ritual behind him, a suspicion he confirmed with his next remark. Urza's gone. I knocked on his door. I thought I'd talk to him and ask his advice. I know that was stupid too, but the door opened, and he's not in there. Zancha spun herself off the bed toward the door. He's gone, walking. I didn't see him leave, Zancha, and I would have. I didn't go far, not out of sight. He's vanished. Planeswalking, she explained, leading the way to the porch and a door to Urza's larger quarters. Dominaria is a plane. Moog, Vatriquois, Ekalar, Sarah's realm, even Phyrexia, they're all planes, all worlds, and Urza can walk among them. Don't ask how, I don't know. I just close my eyes and die a little every time. The sphere that I brought you here in started off as armor, so I could survive when he pulled me after him. But you're Phyrexian. The Phyrexians, how do they get here? Ambulators, artifacts. Zancha put her weight against the door and shoved it open. Not a moment's doubt that Urza was gone, but one surprise when she saw the table was clear. You said you saw him working at the table? Ratapi barreled into her, keeping his balance only by grabbing her shoulders. He let go quickly, as he had when their hands had touched. It was a battlefield, the dawn of fire. Can you tell where he's gone? Zancha shrugged and hurried to the table. No dust, no silver droplets, no gnats stuck in a wood grain or stranded on the floor. She tried to remember another time when Urza had cleaned up after himself so thoroughly. She couldn't. Phyrexia? Ratapi asked at her side again. He wasn't ready for a battle, and there'll be a battle if he ever goes back to Phyrexia. No, I think he's still here, somewhere on Dominaria. But you said among worlds. The fastest way from here to there on Dominaria is to go between worlds. Did he mention Bazarat or Morvern? Ratapi made a sour face. No, why would anyone mention Bazarat or Morvern? Because the Phyrexians are there, on both sides of the war. I told him to go and see for himself. With all the excitement last night, I forgot to ask him what he learned. That the Bazarati are swine and Morvish are sheep? After so many worlds and so many years of wandering, Zancha tended to see similarities. Ratapi had a one-worlder's perspective, which she tried to change. They are equally besieged, equally vulnerable. The Phyrexians are the enemy. Nothing else matters. It was smelling them in Bazarat and Morvern that convinced me the time was right to go looking for you. Urza's got to hold the line in Bazarat and Morvern, or it'll be too late. Ratapi sulked. Why not hold the line in Effin Pincher? Phyrexians are there too, aren't they? I hadn't talked to him about Effin Pincher. I did. He saw her gasp and added, You didn't say I shouldn't. When Zancha had hatched her scheme to end Urza's madness by bringing him face to face with his brother, she'd imagined that she'd be setting the pace, planning the strategies until Urza's wits were sharp again. Her plans had been going awry almost from the beginning, certainly since the burning village. While she came to terms with her error, Ratapi attacked the silence. He didn't seem to know our history, so I tried to tell him everything from the landlings on. He seemed interested. He asked questions, and I answered them. He seemed surprised that I could, because he said my mind was empty, but he paid the closest attention toward the end when I told him about the Shraddha and the red stripes, especially the Shraddha and Avalhir in our holy book. I told him our family wasn't religious, that if he really wanted to know, he should visit the temples of Pincher and listen to the priests. There are still wise priests in Pincher, I think. The Shraddha can't have gotten them all. Enough, Ratapi, Zancha said with a sigh and a finger laid on Ratapi's upper lip. He flinched again. They both took a step back. The increased distance made conversation a little easier. Eye contact, too, if he'd been willing to look at her. It's not your fault. I shouldn't have told him about the temples, Zancha raised her eyebrow. Radapi corrected himself. I shouldn't have told him about the Phyrexians. I should have asked you first. And I would have told you to wait, even though there's nothing I want more than to get Urza moving. You did what you thought was right, and it was right. It's not what I would have done. I've gotten used to that. I warn you, it won't be easy. He'll come back, won't he? Urza just won't roar through effing Pincher, killing every red stripe Phyrexian he can find. With a last look at the table, Zancha headed out. There's no second-guessing Urza the Artificer, Radapi, but if he did, it wouldn't be a bad thing, would it? Killing all the red stripes would leave the Shroud without any enemies. Zancha paused beside the door. You're assuming that there aren't any Phyrexians among the Shroud. Remember what I told you about the Bazarati and the Morvish, the sheep and the swine. I wouldn't count on it. She left Radapi standing in the empty room and had gotten as far as the wellhead beyond the hearth before he came chasing after her. What do we do now? Radapi's cheeks were red above the dark stubble of the 2-day beard. Follow him? We wait. Zancha unknotted the winch and let the bucket drop. Something could go wrong. All the more reason to wait. She began cranking. We'd only make it worse. Urza had never heard of effing Pincher. He didn't know where it was. He doesn't know our language. Zancha let go of the winch. What language do you think you two have been speaking since you got here? Radapi's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. So she went on. I don't know why he says our minds are empty. He's willing to plunder them when it suits him. Urza doesn't just know everything you know. You can keep a secret by just not thinking about it, or by imagining a wall around it. But in the beginning, and maybe all the time, best think that Urza knows what you know. Radapi stood motionless except for his breathing, which was shallow with shock. His flush had faded to a waxy pale. Zancha cranked the bucket up and offered him sweet water from the ladle. Most of it went down his chin, but he found his voice. He knows what I was thinking. The Weakstone and Mishra, how I thought I was outwitting Urza the Artificer. Avo here's mercy. Zancha refilled the ladle and drank. Maybe Urza's mad, Radapi. He hears what he wants to hear. Whether it's your voice or your thoughts, and he might not hear you at all, but he could. That's what you've got to remember. I should have told you sooner. Do you know what I'm thinking? Only when your mouth is open. He closed it immediately, and Zancha walked away, chuckling. She'd gone about 10 steps when Radapi raced past and stopped, facing her. All right, I've had enough. You're Phyrexian. You weren't born. You crawled out of a pit. You're more than 3,000 years old, even though you look about 12. You dress like a man, a boy. You talk like a man, but effing's a tricky language. We talk about things as if they were men or women. A dog is a man, but a cat is a lady. Among ourselves, though, when you say, I did this or I did that, that forms the same, whether I'm a man or a woman. Usually, the difference is obvious. He swallowed hard, and Zancha knew what he was thinking before he opened his mouth again. Last night, Urza, when he'd talk about you, he'd say she and her. What are you, Zancha? A man or a woman? Is it important? Yes, it's important. Neither. She walked past him and didn't break his arm when he spun her back to his face. That's not an answer. It's not the answer you want, she wrenched free. But Urza, why? Phyrexian's not a tricky language. There are no families, no need for men or women, no words for them except in dreams. I have no need for these words until I met a demon. He invaded my mind. After that, and because of it, I've thought of myself as she. Urza. Radapi's voice had harshened. He was indignant, angry. Zancha laughed. No, not Urza. Long before Urza. So you and Urza... Urza! You did read the Antiquity Wars, didn't you? Urza didn't even notice Caleb and Krug. She left Radapi gaping, closed the door behind her.